So in this video, we're going to be talking about how the Roman Empire, far from being destroyed by the 3rd century crisis, instead recovers in a way that, in essence, allows it to endure for another 1,000 years. So the recovery begins to a great extent with Aurelian, who provides hope and a new set of basis for reforms on the political, military, and economic fronts. But he's not in office long enough for it to stick. He is not able to provide the new normal, and there is still another few decades of anarchy before we have Diocletian. Diocletian is actually the one that should be getting the lion's share of the credit, and this is to a certain extent. We talk about things happening during the reigns of kings and emperors, and it gets associated with their names, and so they end up being thought of as the author of things that are actually large-scale social and cultural transformations. But in this case, the transformation needed to come from the top, and it came from Diocletian. Diocletian instigates a number of reforms and institutions that provide the basis for actual recovery from the 3rd century crisis. And the fact that he is able to remain in power for 20 years, the fact that he is able to provide an actual focus of trust and authority in the Roman Empire, which has always revolved around the individual at the top as being the symbol and demarcation of whether the Roman Empire is really working from Julius Caesar on down. The fact that Diocletian is able to do this is a testament to what it is that he brings to the role of princeps of Augustus. And so the part of the problem is that Diocletian is given a negative aspect in terms of history as it is written about him because of his persecution of the Christians. He sees the Christian movement as a dire threat to the strength and power of the Roman Empire, and rightly so, and brings about persecution on a ruthless scale that is long remembered in the history of the Roman Empire and the history of the Christian Church, which, as we know, is about to merge together. So Diocletian, it becomes this figure of wrongness that presages the true revelation of Constantine in the story of the Christian Church, and as many of the people that write about Roman history are Christian and steeped in Christian tradition, this brings about a intentional or unintentional bias in writing about Diocletian. The result is that most of the credit goes to Constantine, whereas and Diocletian has long been overshadowed by him as a result of this. But it is because of Diocletian that we have the reformations of the economy under Diocletian and Constantine, because this is a long process. There's been a century of economic collapse that has to be rebuilt, and so the economy needs to be rebuilt, industry needs to be rebuilt, the monetary system, taxation, all of this needs to be rebuilt. The capacity for movement of goods and shipping across land and sea, and so they need to bring about a new set of coinage that replaces the coins that had been made worthless by the 3rd century emperors. They need to bring about a new a platform of taxation that allows for growth and still ensures the recovery of the imperial system, and so forth and so on. the empire needs to be about the encouragement of economic strength, which had long been taken for granted. The Roman economy is strong, you know, essentially from the conquest of Veii on forward, in the sense that from that standpoint, from the time that Rome is accumulating territorial lands beyond the city of Rome, it has greater resources, it has greater manpower than most of its rivals. And as a result, the Romans have always been in a superior economic position to their subjects and to their potential conquests and to their enemies. The Romans have always made use of these resources in order to build on its ability to ensure a stable city-state of Rome and a thriving trading system throughout the Mediterranean. The third century crisis is a rude collapse, a rude destruction of all of that, and the rebuilding of that is a difficult and wrenching process that needs to be carefully encouraged by the imperial administration, and this is not something that they're used to doing. So this is a difficult process. Diocletian puts this into motion with reforms, economic reforms that are supportive of commercial and industrial growth. Perhaps most importantly, what Diocletian is bringing about politically is a new platform of stability in the form of what we call the Tetrarchy. In other words, um, Diocletian establishes that there is an Augustus in the west and an Augustus in the east, and that each of these in turn adopts a Caesar who is a subordinate co-ruler to provide a measure of visible and durable reliability. When the people look to the pinnacle of their administration, they see not simply one person who can be thrown out this week and replaced by somebody else, but they see two Augusti, and each of them has a subordinate junior co-emperor. And the way in which they do this is interesting in terms of nomenclature, because all of this time, from Augustus on downward, it has been the name Augustus that has been passed on, that has been bequeathed as an inheritance to the adoptive sons that become the next princeps. The Augustus name is what is passed on, and the Caesar name along with it. Caesar Augustus is the name of the individual that is the central pillar of the Roman Empire. And what we have now is that these two names are being separated and come to mean slightly different things. Augustus is the person with the responsibility, and the Caesar is the person who has the capacity to rule as a lieutenant to the person with the larger authority. And this is the way that it's going to be from now on. These men are connected to each other through marriage and through adoption, and so the strength of that system is ensured, and this is meant to provide a precedent. By working together, this also means that the Tetrarchy is able to fight on multiple fronts and able to defend the territory of the Roman Empire more effectively and more confidently than it had been able to in the past. Um, Diocletian is also responsible for the dividing of the empire, and this is not simply in terms of east and west. It's actually better than that, more complicated than that. So um, this is a reorganization of the political state, and it's also a reorganization of the military. The legions are apportioned to all of these territories, and there is a reform and a reorganization of all the legional structure, and also the provisioning of the legions. We talked in the third century crisis about how the legions were having to requisition in kind, rather than being paid in money, and paying for things in money. This is now reorganized and systematized in a way that is actually productive and profitable for the state. The budget and the civil administration is reorganized so that before, under the old provincial system, which goes back to the Roman Republic, you would send out a governor, and that's it. And the governor would be relied upon the elite of the provinces in order to get anything done, in order to work with the local people. He'd have to work through the local provincial nobility, and that would require attending to their needs, and sort of making backroom deals. I'll scratch your back, you'll scratch mine, kind of thing, in order to keep the provincial nobility working for the Roman governors. And so this leads to a sort of dilution of the authority of the Roman governor, because he has to work in this way. And we also have that problem of the governors all being at the same level. That there's just that one layer underneath the emperor that is the governors all portioned out to the provinces, and there's nowhere for them to go in rivalry with each other, except to try to take the emperorship for themselves. How the empire is reorganized under Diocletian is that instead of the old reliance on provinces and the provincial elite, the empire is now separated into 13 dioceses, and each diocese is divided into. There's a total of 100 provinces, and so there is a hierarchy and a civil structure within each province and within each diocese that is able to take care of local needs from a Roman perspective. This is, that reliance on the provincial elites and all that broke down in the third century anyway. So this is essentially a revised and innovative system to ensure that Roman governance is present in all of these places, and that there is a system of individuals that are in a chain of command going all the way up to the emperor. And there are also a separate military system, so that you have regional generals who have the title of duke, which is simply a Roman word that means commander or leader. And so this is where the later concept of layers of nobility and peerage and so forth comes from. But the idea here is this system is structured and stable in a way that provides a better set of resources for Roman political administration. Now, the interesting thing is that the Romans do this after the Christian church had already done the same kind of thing, creating a system and network of structures under bishops and archbishops and patriarchs, which we'll talk about in the next video. And they were providing services at the local grassroots level while the empire was falling apart. So this is the Roman Empire establishing something that allows it to survive, but they are also doing so parallel to an existing structure in the Christian world. Diocletian also creates an imperial court a retinue of officials that are in the emperor's company. We saw before that the Severans had shifted toward an imperial council instead of relying upon the Senate, and now under Diocletian and the successors, we have an imperial court that is about advice to the emperor, but also about visibility of status, and that becomes very important later on in the Eastern Empire. And the Senate is sidelined to a very large extent in a sort of ornamental capacity. Um, Under Constantine, we have a sort of reunification in the sense that Diocletian and Maximian essentially ruled as two separate Augusti in the east and the west. Constantine is the Augustus that rules over both. And so he becomes a single Augustus, although there is a Kaiser in each set of territories. But the Diocletian reform still stands, which is that the Roman Empire is now administered in these 13 dioceses and is operating itself in the east and west under its own accord. And so the fact that Constantine is ruling over the whole of the Roman Empire as Augustus is less meaningful than it might seem. What Constantine is most famous for is essentially three things. One is he founds a city which eventually becomes named after him at a very strategic location. And one of the reasons that Constantinople is so important is the place that it occupies. The original location was a Greek colony called Byzantion, which is why the later Eastern Empire in the Middle Ages is called the Byzantine Empire, but they didn't call it that. They called it the Roman Empire. The Byzantine Empire was invented by modern historians as a name to separate it from, history of the Roman Empire, which they thought belonged to the ancient era only. But the Romans, ruled in Constantinople, which they called New Rome, and the position here is very important. So you can look at this and see that strategically defending the city is made immensely easy by its location, and the building of the walls reinforces this on the western side, so that it's very difficult to take the city of Constantinople by land or by sea. But even more importantly, this is the place where you cross over from Europe to Asia. So we have Southeast Europe on the left, on the west side, and on the east side we have Anatolia. This passage north-south, the Bosporus, leads into the Black Sea. The Black Sea is a very important trading area going back to the time of the ancient Greeks and still through to today. The Black Sea is an abundant source of natural resources, timber and fur and food, grains and so forth, and also markets for produced goods, for finished goods that are being made and sold in the Black Sea area. And so the traffic through this territory, the traffic through this passage, the Bosporus, is immensely important, and being able to be situated here at Constantinople means that you can literally control this traffic, because all of it comes through the Bosporus, and it is possible, as is later done, to place a chain across this channel. It's a very wide passage, but it's still possible to take a ship and drag a chain across and block this passage. Strategically, in terms of military strategy and in commercial strategy, trading strategy, the location of Constantinople is vitally important. In terms of the identity of the empire, the imbalance of East and West had been more and more apparent over the last several hundred years. we've talked before about how the movement of trades and goods has been toward a center of gravity in the East. And this has meant that money and currency has been draining out of the West and into the East. Skilled labor and intellect has been draining out of the West and into the East. The East has always been the center of culture and industry. Its cities and peoples are far older than Rome itself in many cases, and so the vibrancy of the East, culturally and commercially, has been a pull in that direction for the entire Roman Empire. Ever since the years after the Punic Wars. And so, as a result of this, the West has become more and more secondary. And the West is where Rome is. The capital of the Roman Empire is in the wrong place for the Roman Empire as it stands in the year 300. And so, Diocletian, by establishing all of these dioceses and essentially dividing the rule of East and West, is acknowledging that the East and West have very different needs. This isn't simply, the divide isn't simply for the convenience of, okay, you take half and I'll take half, and that way it'll be easier to manage. It isn't just that the Roman Empire was too big for one person to rule. The Eastern Empire and the Western Empire are two different animals by this point. Two different sets of cultural and economic needs. And especially the recovery from the third century crisis, very different in the West and in the East. And so, Diocletian, creates that divide, which acknowledges this. Constantine establishing a second Rome in this very key place at the heart of the East, in what is Greek territory at the top of the Aegean, acknowledging the contribution of Greek culture to the Roman to the Roman ethos, and in immensely important trading position. Planting this capital here is all but saying, this is our future. They are meant to be equal capitals, Rome and Constantinople, but Constantinople, from the beginning, has the advantage, and it is the Roman capital that outlasts Rome. And so the founding of Constantinople is feted as a immensely important event, and the attribution to Constantine of his being far-seeing in placing Constantinople here to the benefit of centuries of descendants is much talked about. The fact is that this is an absolutely vital turning point for the story of the Roman Empire. Likewise, Constantine and Christianity, there are two aspects of this. One is his supposed conversion. There are two aspects of this. One is that at the Battle of the Mulvian Bridge, he supposedly embraced Christianity. He saw a sign in the sky that said, "You should fight under this banner," and he takes this as a means of bringing about victory in a way that is very reminiscent of things that had happened in Roman history before. Perhaps the most famous example is at the Battle of Lake Regillus, at the very beginning of the Roman Republic. So that's like 496, 498 BCE. So this is 800 years before this, the Battle of Lake Regillus, when the Romans are fighting for their lives against an alliance of the exiled Tarquins and the Latins. The Romans are in desperate straits, and they're fighting for their lives, and they're visited by visions of Castor and Pollux. Castor and Pollux, the twin Roman gods. that appear in the battlefield and also in the Roman Forum at the same time, encouraging the Romans to fight and to persevere. And this brings about the great victory that the Battle of Lake Regillus that ensures the perseverance of the city of Rome, the survival of the city of Rome when it might have been destroyed. So visitations from the gods in order to bring about Roman military victory is a trope, and the Mullion Bridge moment is an instance of that. It's not necessarily Constantine saying, "Okay, now I'm a Christian and there are no other gods." This is Constantine saying, "This is something that this is a sign from the heavens that Rome is meant to be superior, and we can use this to rally the troops and to bring about this victory." Later on, he's supposed to have converted on his deathbed. Who knows whether that actually happened or the sincerity of that if he did so. What is more important is the way in which Constantine uses Christianity. And this is more notable in something that we do have concrete evidence of, which is the Edict of Milan. The Edict of Milan is designed to bring about toleration of Christians. It doesn't make Christianity official. It doesn't make, the Roman Empire or Christian Empire. Edict of Milan simply says that Christians will be tolerated along with all other religions. What this is acknowledging is what is actually supposed to have been Roman policy all this time, which is to say that that the Romans are not interested in imposing religious ideology on its subjects. Um, that works very well with paganism because paganism is local. The problem is that the Edict of Milan gives Christianity free rein to continue to build its network and infrastructure throughout the Roman Empire, building up its local and regional power and building up a system that is essentially constructed in rivalry with the power structure, the political power structure of the Roman Empire. And so Constantine is acknowledging through the Edict of Milan, which we have a version of the text of, Constantine is acknowledging that Christianity is a force that's, that is an endemic part of the Roman Empire as it stands today. The people of the provinces need the Christian system in order to be connected with each other, and the numbers and resources of the Christians are such that it would be folly to try to destroy them, as Diocletian was still trying to do only a few years earlier. What the Edict of Milan is doing is acknowledging that Christianity is a presence and paving the way for it to potentially be co-opted by the Roman Empire and used to bring about a new level of unity rather than being in opposition. And the problem is that there's no incentive for the church to do this unless they get something out of it, unless they retain the power that they've acquired through the third century crisis, and recovering from that and building from that in a way that Rome was only able to do belatedly and successively. And so the result of that is that we now have two different power structures that are in friction and contention with each other, but are no longer at war. And how the Roman Empire is able to resolve that is going to be what we'll talk about in the next video. Until then, that's that.